That is not possible. How did a human break my record?
You measured the wrong thing. You always have.
Somewhere above Earth, a machine built to measure human weakness was about to break instead. The Kaldrenn Compact had ruled 40 systems for 6 centuries, and in all that time, no species had impressed them less than humans. Soft hands, short lives, no natural armor, no venom, no claws. When the Compact finally opened contact, their verdict was already written. Humanity would be classified as a developing labor culture, fit for trade routes and little else. Their proof was simple. The grip trial, a crystal cylinder that measured raw crushing force, had sat untouched in a hall of bindings for 17 years, ever since a Kaldrenn war champion named Vosk Rha had set a record no species since had come close to matching. Kaldrenn hands were built for it, 4 fingers thick as human wrists, bone reinforced like coral. The trial wasn't a game to them. It was a scoreboard for who deserved a seat at the table. Marcus Toledo had never heard of the grip trial. He was 34, worked cargo loading on Reyes Station, and had exactly one photograph taped inside his locker. His grandfather Efren, 91 years old, gripping a young Marcus's hand in a technique the old man called the quiet hold. Efren had been a dockworker in Veracruz for 50 years, moving crates twice his weight without ever straining his back. Strength isn't in the muscle, Mijo, he used to say, guiding an 8-year-old Marcus's fingers into the right position. It's in where you put it. Marcus hadn't thought about that lesson in years. He didn't need to. Not until the Compact's arrival ship anchored above the station, and a diplomat with too many teeth announced that Earth will be permitted one cultural demonstration to determine humanity's trade status. They chose the grip trial. They chose it because they already knew the answer. Marcus was chosen because he was standing closest to the loading bay when the summons came through, and because Station Command needed a volunteer in the next 4 minutes or forfeit by default. He said yes before he understood what he was agreeing to. He would understand soon enough. And somewhere in the back of his mind, uninvited, an old man's voice was already telling him where to put his hands. The Hall of Bindings was carved from a single asteroid, its walls etched with the names of every champion who had ever gripped the cylinder. Vosk Rha's name glowed brightest, gold letters 3 feet tall, unchallenged for 17 years. Vosk Rha himself stood waiting when Marcus arrived. He was enormous, gray-skinned, with forearms like ship cabling, and he looked at Marcus the way a demolition crew looks at a house already scheduled for collapse. "This is the champion of Earth," Vosk Rha said, and the gathered Kaldrenn officials laughed, a dry, clicking sound like breaking twigs. "I have crushed diamond gauntlets in this hand. I have snapped the wrist bones of Threxian wrestlers twice your mass. Whatever you have prepared, small one, prepare instead to lose with dignity." The cylinder pulsed to life between them, its display counting in Kaldrenn units of force. Vosk Rha gripped first, as champion's right, and the number climbed past every mark on the display's lower half in under 2 seconds, settling just shy of his own 17-year record. A demonstration, not even his full effort. The crowd's clicking laughter grew louder. Then it was Marcus's turn. He gripped the cylinder the way he'd gripped 10,000 crates, and the display barely moved. A number so low the Kaldrenn officials didn't bother translating it into words. Someone in the crowd made a sound that needed no translation at all. "A formality," the diplomat announced. "Trade status, labor caste confirmed." But Vosk Rha wasn't finished. Pride demanded more than a formality. He wanted a story to tell, a margin so wide it would be remembered. "Again," he said, "properly this time, human. Or should I hold your hand for you?" He reached across the cylinder and closed his massive fingers around Marcus's wrist. Not to test him, but to demonstrate exactly how easily that wrist could be broken. Marcus felt the pressure building, felt the first real edge of pain, and heard the crowd's laughter shift into something hungrier. For one terrible second, he almost pulled away, almost let them see him flinch. Then he felt it, not in his arm, but in his memory. An old man's calloused fingers, adjusting his grip 1 degree at a time. Not there, Mijo. There. Vosk Rha smiled with too many teeth and tightened his hold. Last chance to yield. Marcus didn't answer. He was too busy remembering exactly where to put his hands. From where Vosk Rha stood, the fight should already have been over. He felt the human's wrist shift beneath his grip. A small motion. Almost nothing. The kind of adjustment a creature makes when it's about to break. He leaned in to watch it happen. Instead, Marcus rotated his hand a precise 15 degrees, dropped his elbow, and drove his own fingers into the narrow gap between two of Vosk Rha's largest knuckles. Not with force, but with placement. The exact seam where bone met tendon, where 17 years of alien pride had never once been tested because no opponent had ever bothered to look for it. The champion's hand spasmed open on its own. For half a second, the hall of bindings went completely silent. Then Marcus's free hand closed around the cylinder, and he did what his grandfather had taught him on a dock in Veracruz decades before any of this mattered. He stopped trying to overpower the weight and started using it against itself. He shifted his stance, angled his shoulder, let his whole body, not his arm, his whole body, become the lever. The display began to climb. Vosk Rha's smug expression cracked into something new. Confusion first, then the dawning shape of alarm, as the number surged past his own effort, past the halfway mark, past his personal best. "That is not possible," he said, and for the first time in 17 years, his voice wasn't certain of anything. The crowd's clicking laughter had gone completely silent. Every eye in the hall was locked on the display as it climbed past the gold letters etched into the wall, past Vosk Rha's record, past the number that had stood untouched since before Marcus was born. The cylinder chimed. A new name began etching itself into the wall in burning gold script. Toledo. Vosk Rha stared at his own throbbing hand, then at Marcus, then at the number still glowing above them both. "Ow," he said. Not a challenge this time. A genuine question. Marcus flexed his fingers, feeling the ache settle into his knuckles like an old friend arriving late. "My grandfather spent 50 years moving crates twice his size," he said quietly. He never once used more strength than the job required. He just always knew exactly where to put his hands. He looked up at the gold letters glowing above the silent hall. "You measure the wrong thing," Marcus said. "You always have." The footage reached Kaldrenn Central within the hour, and by the following cycle it had reached every world in the Compact's network. A small, soft-handed human, standing beneath 17 years of alien pride, rewriting the record with a technique that used no strength the Compact could measure or understand. Compact War Council chambers erupted into furious debate. Some officials demanded the trial be redesigned entirely, arguing that pure crushing force had never actually measured skill, only mass. Others insisted the result be dismissed as trickery, an anomaly, anything except what it plainly was. Vosk Rha said nothing in his own defense. He simply requested, formally and without argument, that his name be moved beneath Toledo's on the hall wall, a gesture the Compact had no precedent for and no framework to refuse. The diplomat who had announced Earth's labor caste status was recalled within the week. Trade negotiations, suddenly, were reopened from an entirely different starting position. On Reyes Station, none of that reached Marcus until 3 days later, when he was back in the loading bay, running the same shift he'd run 100 times before. His supervisor handed him a data slate showing his own face on a dozen alien news networks, captioned in 6 languages he couldn't read. Marcus glanced at it, nodded once, and went back to stacking crates, because some things didn't need an audience to matter. That night, he called his grandfather. Efren answered slow, the way he always did now, his voice thinner than Marcus remembered, but no less certain. "They're saying you broke some kind of record up there," the old man said. "Some machine." "I used your grip," Marcus said. The quiet hold. "It worked on an alien twice my size." There was a long pause, filled with the particular silence of a man deciding whether to be proud or unsurprised. "Of course it worked," Efren said finally. "Strength was never the trick, Mijo. I told you that when you were 8 years old." Marcus smiled, alone in his quarters, looking out at the stars the Compact had once claimed as proof of their own superiority. "I know, Grandpa," he said. "I finally understand where to put my hands. Somewhere above Earth, in a hall built by an empire that measured worth in crushed diamond and broken bone. A new name glowed in gold. Not the strongest hand the galaxy had ever seen, but the smartest one. Humanity was never the strongest species in the room. It just always knew exactly where to put its hands.